to our Monday, September 19 edition of the Government News Brief. In the news, Guyana calls on Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association to support juridical settlements to Venezuela's border claim. Trafficking in Persons Ministerial Task Force begins implementation of aspects of its action plan, and agro-processing sector has major prospects for investments. Stay tuned as we bring you the details of these and other stories. Thank you for staying with us. I am Renetta LaFleur. Here now are the details. Guyana seeks the Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association support for its call for a juridical settlement to the border controversy with Venezuela. Details in this Kadaki Amsterdam report.
The call was made by Acting President and Prime Minister Moses Nagumutu during the feature address at the first ever Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association conference in Guyana.
I have raised this matter with you, Your Honours, our distinguished visitors, because you represent a wide spread of Commonwealth jurisdictions, and for a cause, we seek your solidarity and support. It is a matter that touches the international rule of law.
The Prime Minister says Venezuela's claim to a significant part of Guyana's territory, where huge oil deposits have been found, is troublesome and is responsible for President Granger being absent from the opening ceremony.
After 50 years of independence, Guyana deserves a better life. At last, Guyana is on the threshold of a prosperous and exciting future. We can do without this threat confronting us as a border controversy. We are pursuing, as Professor William Bishop has espoused, settlement by law. Guyana has proposed to the United Nations a juridical settlement, and this is what has taken our President to the United Nations this week.
Further, the acting president says Venezuela is guilty of violating international law since its claims to Guyana's territory have been settled and therefore have no legal standing.
The boundaries between Guyana and Venezuela were identified and settled as a result of the decision of an international tribunal established to do just that since 1899. It is Guyana's contention that Venezuela's aggressive stance towards us and its past incursions into our territory are violative of international law and norms.
Despite agreeing to the awards of an 1899 tribunal to settle the border controversy, Venezuela has, in recent times, continued to lay claims to Guyana's territory. Venezuela alleges corruption on the part of the 1899 tribunal, which ruled in Guyana's favor. Kidaki Amsterdam for Government News Brief.
Agro-processing sector has major prospects for investment as the local investment climate is likely to be improved. Find out how from Delicia Haynes.
Guyana's investment climate can see major developments in the agro-processing sector after the consideration of applications for this and other sectors. Owen Verwey, Chief Executive Officer of GoInvest, explains.
We've seen applications from agro-processing from the aquaculture area right down to the traditional cash crops that Guyana have been producing, the peppers, the cabbages, the leaf vegetables, and those kind of areas.
Verwey points out that prospective investors have been conducting a number of studies towards moving forward with proposed investments.
Agro-processing is very critical in terms of future development of this economy. We are agricultural-based or commodity-based economy. We've got very, very large land mass, arable land too. We've received those expressions of interest to a large extent, very few applications to date. So what that means is that people, they're investors who are interested in the market. They're actually doing either pre-feasibility, feasibility, or they're doing actual business case development before they move forward in that area.
Additionally, the agro-processing sector will grow with collaborative efforts made with the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, and the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, GCCI, to prepare agro-processing investors for the market.
The Caribbean Development Bank, together with the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is completing an agro-processing, a value-added, a competitiveness study on the value-added industry with specific focus on the agro-processing sector, and that will provide significant information for both us, the industry, and finances going forward.
GoInvest had been receiving applications and expressions of interest in the oil and gas sector, manufacturing, tourism, general services, and the ICT sector. In addition, the agriculture sector has attracted investors in forestry and the wood processing sector. For the Government News Brief, I am Delicia Haynes.
The Ministerial Task Force on Trafficking in Persons has begun implementing aspects of its action plan. Tiffany Rodias has the details.
A training of trainers session is expected to begin next month, according to Oliver Prophet, acting coordinator of the TIP Ministerial Task Force.
I think that's basically marshaled by the Counter Trafficking in Persons unit that I mentioned before from the Ministry of Social Protection. And that would enable us to have a wider base as well. Persons that can actually administer training or go and do awareness sessions elsewhere.
Training and public awareness are an essential part of the TIP action plan. In April, members of the Guyana Police Force benefited from Interpol training in TIP. Prophet explains that members of the judicial system are also set to benefit from Interpol training on the subject in October and November.
From the prosecutorial section and also from magistracy, all these we have coming up, and victim support and these things. So the idea now is for them to be able to come back with the knowledge that they gained from this training and be able to retrain or to pass down to others, basically, to members on the task force and also to others that work in their fields.
Several public awareness walks through markets in the city and in Berbice have already been conducted by the Ministerial Task Force. Prophet explains the task force plans to target schools next.
The other idea coming up from task force members of having flash mobs done, and that being a good way to basically to attract students' attention, have them really focusing on the issue and actually gain from it while being entertained.
The TIP action plan is expected to be released later this year. Many of the proposed activities laid out in the plan are expected to be rolled out within the new year. The TIP Ministerial Task Force, comprising governmental and non-governmental organizations, was reconvened earlier this year to combat trafficking in persons. Guyana is no longer on the Tier 2 watch list but has moved up to Tier 2. Tier 2 is characterized by countries whose governments do not fully comply with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act's minimum standards, but are making significant efforts to bring themselves into compliance. For the Government News Brief, I'm Tiffany Rogers.
Education Commission of Inquiry concludes in Region 1 with calls for welfare officers to deal with students in discipline. More in this report.
At the Ministry of Education's public consultations in Maruka, Port Kaituma and Mabaruma, teachers, parents, regional education officers and regional representatives made presentations on how the education system can be bettered. Chairman of the COI, Ed Caesar, says he is very pleased with the public's turnout. However, Caesar points out that a number of issues were raised by teachers, including unclean and unfavorable learning environment.
It seems that there is some directive from the Public Service Ministry which clearly indicates that the position of cleaners, that is the appointment of cleaners, that has been put on hold. So teachers and parents have been tasked, according to the reports of the consultations, with having the place clean. And our teachers are not very happy with that.
Teachers and parents spoke of indiscipline exhibited by students and called for the placement of welfare officers.
They spoke about the welfare of teachers and students, wanting there to be appointment of welfare officers. And the welfare officer must not deal only with students and pupils, but also for teachers.
Caesar explains that a request was also made for the COI to make the necessary representations for the appointment of cleaners. Caesar says the consultations proved that teachers are interested in students' development, but notes that if teachers are not given the opportunity for higher education, development of young people would remain stagnant. Caesar adds that teachers and parents were calling for the implementation of the recommendations made through the consultations.
And I'm going to ensure that the necessary recommendations are made, and the minister has indeed promised that he will do whatever he has to do to cause some better things to happen based on the recommendations from the Commission of Inquiry.
The education COI will be taken to Bartica, Linden and Letham next. The COI commenced in April and is expected to conclude in December. For the Government News Brief, I'm Tiffany Rogers.
Persons skilled in indigenous dialects will be trained as welfare officers to better serve the hinterland communities. Find out how in this report. Minister of Social Protection Wald Lawrence says the aim is to bridge the language barrier between the hinterland and the coastland so that those hinterland communities speaking indigenous dialects will have an equal opportunity to have their voices heard.
We are going to work with the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs to ensure that in 9, 8, 7, and 1, that we can bring persons who are versed in terms of the languages, 1 or 2 languages of the indigenous people, dialect.
The language barrier has resulted in those communities being left behind. The Social Protection Minister explains that this initiative will not only break those barriers, but will also create employment.
We're not looking to have them come to an office. We would like them to work in the villages. But now that we have offices in all of the regions and the sub-regions, that they will be under the supervision of those officers.
There are 4 main indigenous tribes: the Warros, Arawaks, Wapisianas, and the Caribs, and several sub-tribes. The indigenous peoples have long been asking for support to maintain their languages. Government has since started the Indigenous Peoples Language Revival Project. Ronetta LaFleur for the Government News Brief. We have come to an end of today's edition of the Government News Brief. The details of these and other stories can be found on GINA's website. GINA has an active Facebook page, and we encourage you to visit and like us so you can be informed as the news unfolds. Remember to join us again tomorrow when the Government Information Agency brings you another edition of the Government News Brief. I am Ronetta LaFleur. Thank you for watching.